All right, we're going. Um, so yeah, so last time, obviously, you all oversaw the heroic defense of Fort Leland, Stanford. You had extremely light casualties on your side. I'm actually even going to say just 10 wounded because, like, you got mechanically, you all got hit one time, and it was one shot from the enemy 6-pounders. And I'm going to say it's basically like splinter wounds, right? Like it hit the kind of adobe sort of stone wall, and it went, yeah. And so you've got a bunch of guys who look like cool looking cuts on their faces from the cavalry. So other than that, like just very, really minor wounds that don't even count as casualties. Like, I pinched my finger on my percussion cap, sir.
We were chasing the Rebs so fast, I got a mighty stitch in my side.
Exactly.
It's mighty powerful.
Yeah. But very, very light casualties. You inflicted something like 150 or so, including capturing 60 prisoners. But yeah, and they blew up. One of their guns blew up. So obviously you didn't get to capture that one, but they are down a 6-pounder. So that's pretty good. But otherwise, yeah, you have held the field with the sort of somewhat slightly late arrival of Keakia and the one of the Kiowa cavalry regiments that has just trooped in. And they chased down the fleeing Confederates, and some of them were, shot down trying to surrender, and some of them were scalped afterward, and nobody's really shedding too much of a tear for any of that, honestly. But yeah, you've managed to hold the field. So if anybody does want to do any interrogation of any of the prisoners that you've captured, again, you have 60. They were from just Texas militia, like Western Texas militia. So these guys are basically either younger than like 25 or older than about 50. None of them are really in the kind of the prime soldier age. They're quite young. These are the people that have been left behind rather than being mustered out and going to fight, around New Orleans or in Chattanooga or places like that. So, and I actually believe Chattanooga, the siege of Chattanooga, is happening like right now. I think that's the timeline. I can't remember. Anyway, not that you have anything to do with it, because you're way the hell in West Texas.
Did we capture any? It doesn't look like any of them might be officers.
Well, go ahead and either of you give me a roll. So this would be anything interpersonal would count, or even like leadership or something like that. Or you could just have a detachment to it.
I'll ask some of them with, I think my charm and personal magnetism.
Mm-hmm. Just sitting down, getting out the hideous old rum.
Rum whiskey,
Yeah.
as you may recall from the bottle that was unearthed archaeologically. I was very proud of that.
That was like pretty fun.
Dad. Rum whiskey.
Yeah. Whiskey made from fresh rum.
Right. Yeah, it's just like beer wine.
Right.
I think I have rolled this correctly. Because that's my charm plus my 2 personal magnetism. I'm sorry, I constantly
No, that's all good.
But I'm learning more each time.
Yeah. No, that should work. With a 6. So
yeah, I got a smiley face.
Yeah, you actually captured the pretty badly wounded lieutenant of artillery. So he was actually the guy. He was a quite a young guy overseeing the small battery of 6-pounders that they had, and he was wounded when the gun burst. So he was sort of left behind as the Confederates retreated. But he seems to be the only one that was kind of any close to like an officer. But sort of your evaluation of the prisoners is that these guys are West Texas militia, and they're very much like they're more similar to like Twiggs' regiment, right? Where they're very independent, and these guys this whole thing was kind of a more of a democratically led sort of a thing, where it's like, no, I mean, there's Yankees on our doorstep. Let's go get them. That kind of a thing. So anyway, this badly wounded young lieutenant gives you some pretty basic information about them. They were under the colonels Marshall Hooder and Colin Dredger. And he gives you sort of an estimation of their strength. Again, they were two kind of understrength infantry regiments supported by kind of loose artillery. And this was just what they managed to muster within like a couple of days. Obviously, like if they were to go really scour kind of the western counties of Texas, they could find quite a few more. And they could field something that's probably not a division size, but they might even be able to get up to something like a corps strength. So like 3 or 4, maybe 5,000 men total among these sort of western kind of Texan territories and whatnot. Most of the interrogation seems to be centered on the fact that this guy, this young lieutenant, is sort of appalled that the Union is riding with Indians, and especially that, and is very concerned about what you plan to do with the, as he refers to them, chattels that they have in Texas.
I would, for one, like to, I guess not allay his fears, but comfort him by offering him a nip of some of Cash Regis's special select reserve rum whiskey.
Yeah.
For his wounds, and also offering him a signed pamphlet
of course,
my broadsheet.
Of course.
So he can remember
on your
the day
lump.
he was interrogated by Cash Regis. Advice for after the war, son.
Right.
Not your lump. The two other questions I would like to ask him specifically about are, what do they know of our detachment, our task force as a whole, any objectives that we have, and if he has heard anything of the anti-Confederate price.
Okay. Yeah. So, yeah. So the first, their kind of estimate of this, like your strength, is like they think there are more of you than there are. So that's one thing. Is they think that you're coming in with like something like army sized, like several divisions, rather than just the one, right? So you've probably got 12 to 15,000 men total, but that's kind of a question mark, right? Because a lot of your sort of cavalry strength, particularly, is Indian volunteers. What you're terming Indian volunteers, right? As saying like like they have been drummed into the army by in kind of any official capacity, but you have like these, yeah, like very heavily fluctuating numbers of like Allied Indian cavalry, and so they don't really know. You don't, like, you guys can't even count that day to day. That's a sort of difficult thing to keep pinned down. But they do think that you have like a much bigger force. They think you're coming in with like 20 or 30,000 men, and so that's part of why they were so kind of gung-ho to see if they could come and sort of recapture this little fort really quickly, when they knew that it was just a detached like brigade that was there. And but that also suggests that they're probably going to be a little bit more eager to stop you where they can, and probably a lot more of these little you sort of like militia volunteer brigades are going to be popping up to try to slow you down as you can. So there's not really much you're going to get into when you're still way out here in the west, of course, but as you gotta get closer to taking the stagecoach roads into central Texas, that's when you might start seeing a lot more resistance. As far as what they know about Price, he's being a little coy, but you get the sense that they also have no idea what Price is up to, because Price is like cut loose from the Confederate hierarchy, like officially. Like they've heard that at least. So they know that Price is like a renegade army, but as far as he knows, Price hasn't really done anything aggressive yet. And for like as you're sort of asking a bunch of these questions, right, you kind of get the sense of, you get a couple of details. And so one of the details is that Texas has actually been a place for at least the last year where a bunch of slave owners from the southern states, and especially the border states that are kind of frequently getting invaded, but are also having Confederate armies kind of parked in there. The problem with both of those is that if the Union Army is anywhere close, their labor force will run to the Union lines, and be kind of processed as contraband, right? And especially now after the Emancipation Proclamation, which in this time is only like a month, it's like 6 weeks old, right? It's very fresh. But even especially after that, right, they're worried that Union forces are basically going to be acting as emancipators officially, like they're coming in to free the slaves, which before wasn't really a big concern. But even Confederate armies that are parked in and around places in the Deep South will impress enslaved labor for use in the army. So one of the things that a lot of slave owners have been doing is actually like shipping their slaves into Texas and basically renting them out as labor in Texas, to work in the mills and the factories and all the stuff that's kind of building war material, to keep them out of the way of both armies that are actually kind of circulating around in the Deep South. So a couple of things. So one, they're ambivalent about Price, and they don't know exactly what he's up to because he is a renegade. He's not functioning as part of the Confederate hierarchy anymore, and they don't really know exactly what he's up to. Two is that Texas is actually going to have a much, much, much higher percentage of like enslaved labor forces than most of the other states in the Confederacy, because slave owners have been shipping them there, because until now there hasn't been any Union presence to speak of in Texas at all, apart from like naval operations and whatnot. So that's a couple of things. That's one of the reasons why this young lieutenant guy is concerned, and that's part of why the West Texas guys are really, really interested in stopping or slowing your advance as much as possible.
Well, did we ever get any direction on how our divisional commander wanted to handle slave labor?
Not yet. That has been somewhat unaddressed. So it might be something you want to ask him when the rest of the division arrives, which will probably be like... Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I'm going to deliberately not ask him.
Okay. So there's also a thing, you could maybe get ahead of it and set a precedent and basically like say like, well, the way we have been handling it is if we free them when we find them, and just say like, well, we've been doing that already, so, probably shouldn't go back on our...
It wouldn't be fair to the rest.
Right.
You know what? That's what I'll do. So while okay. While Regis is running the interrogations, I'm going to be writing up something to like give the stamp of official whatever the hell to what we did here with the slaves.
Okay.
And basically make it sound like I'm passing the buck to someone while continuing on and doing what I want. So like in accordance with the Emancipation Proclamation and standards and guidelines set forth by the government of the United States, all what's the right words? All enslaved people encountered by federal forces shall be freed and remanded to the United States government. But like have a piece of paper that says that.
Sure. Yeah.
That has my name on it, and just like kind of say, oh yeah, this is the official aha.
Yeah, this is like your version of what like Sherman's Special Order 52 or whatever it was, where it's like we're gonna take a third of the South and here every slave gets to live here.
Yep, basically that.
Okay.
I'm sure Regis and I have worked together before, so Andrew, if you see this document, you're going to be very much like, oh, it's Ed. He's doing his fucking abolitionist shit again, and this clearly has no legitimacy. It's just him with a gun saying it's cool. Yeah,
but I mean, it will like bureaucratically. That is a thing that actually will make a difference when it comes to sort of the question of what to do with however you want to call them, like emancipated laborers, slaves, chattel, contraband, whatever the term. like this being sort of a best practices that has already been practiced by this division is going to help sort of set that precedent. So, yeah. All right.
I have one additional question
Sure.
for our patron
Mhm.
or our
Guest.
guest.
Your
is
honored
the word I was
guest.
thinking of. Yes. I want to know if he knows the whereabouts, the last known whereabouts of Sam Houston.
Sam Houston. That's a very good question.
So, as a brief aside, Sam Houston in the original timeline would have died this week, like in
Okay.
1863.
Yeah.
But I like to imagine he could have lived a little bit longer
Yeah.
because I would like to add a personal goal or quest. I know you were looking at
Sure.
those.
Yeah.
I would like to meet Sam Houston. He seems like a guy that Cash Regis would love because he, like, tells the rest of Texas like secession is a bad idea. Don't do this,
Uh-huh.
and then just has to like leave the governorship. He doesn't leave Texas.
Mhm.
He's just like, I'm against this.
Okay.
But because I like America, they like came to our aid when we asked them to, and all that. So like Sam Houston is the kind of guy that Cash Regis would like. And my goal is to meet him and get him to author a foreword to like a second edition of Find Your Lump with foreword by
Of course.
noted hero Sam Houston.
Yeah. So I just want to point
While
out.
we're in Texas,
Yeah. I just want to
seems
point
like
out.
we should go find him.
Yeah. That just I know that the two of you kind of know, but it's something that I was thinking about it and I was like, oh, is that the Mexican War was literally like the amount of time in 1863 as right now in 2021 was to the start of the Afghan War or the invasion of Iraq. So it's still pretty fresh, and especially here in Texas, right? Like these are still very fresh memories. And obviously, like I don't need to tell you guys that most of the generals of the Union and Confederate forces were veterans of the Mexican War in some capacity or another. But this obviously is especially keen to people who live in Texas. But speaking of other very famous people, Kit Carson is actually the adjutant for the Comanche volunteer regiments. He has been sort of he was convinced by some plucky group of outcasts and weirdos in Santa Fe during the negotiations at Fort Sumner, and he has actually been he softened a little bit of his or not the Comanche, sorry, he's with the Apache volunteers. So he and Cochise are actually like the two people kind of heading up the Apache detachments. So Carson has obviously been convinced somehow that this is actually a net benefit for everyone, even though that Carson himself is, even by 1863, has made basically his entire life career as an Indian fighter and was noted as being especially harsh toward the Apache. So this 180 is brought to you by the magic of role-playing games, and the other campaign made it a thing. But it's yeah. So Kit Carson is actually with the division. He's there, and that's something that you can all sort of draw on if you need to. But yeah, so yeah, you've got basically you have to wait for like a day or two for the rest of the division to arrive. Is there anything else you'd like to do before that happens?
I would like to have a sidebar with Colonel Twiggs. After our interrogation has suggested that they vastly overestimate our force, that's I don't necessarily see as a good thing for us because they're going to over prepare. However, we could use somehow their lack of information. What are we gonna do with these 60 men we've captured? I imagine we might parole them similar to the men who initially occupied this fort. And an idea or a suggestion, I like the idea of giving one of them a parting gift and accidentally leaving some orders in there that might suggest that are at a different size of our force and perhaps different destination. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think that's a bad idea. I think I don't think them thinking overestimating our strength is going to hurt us because they're also going to be more inclined to do things like fall back on positions further east when they meet serious resistance. I like the idea of the sneaky orders.
I mean, we can also reinforce their belief that we're a much larger force.
Yes.
Perhaps that would cause them to not wish to engage us for quite some time, but I feel like when they do, they're going to be over-prepared. So I don't know.
Well, there's a lot of Texas, and there's a good chance that the place is over-prepared. They've underprepared somewhere else, and we can just go around it.
That is.
Yeah, so...
Go ahead.
That you raise a good point. So yeah, especially for this lieutenant who I'm assuming he will survive, although wounded.
Yes.
Hoping he will. After speaking with him, I'd like to send him with a parting gift again of a signed copy of my book.
Of course.
And tucked in there, I'd like to leave a set of false orders drawn up from stump grinding to appear as if inadvertently shuffled in, and perhaps something to suggest that our detachment is being sent specifically I don't know, to let me consult my manual first.
Sure. Yeah. I didn't actually open it up, of course.
Well, based on the stagecoach route that I believe we intend on continuing to follow in searching, I'd like to suggest in our orders that we're being sent to seize like the Dance Brothers shop and onto Galveston specifically, to cut Texas in half, seize this last major port. So when we swing further north towards something like Austin, or stay on our stagecoach route, that's not where they're expecting us.
Okay.
Do you concur, Colonel?
Yes.
All right. So yeah, orders or words to that effect, in confirming their belief that this is a full army-sized unit that is intended on cutting Texas in half and raiding the Texas coast down towards Galveston.
Okay.
As our ultimate destination.
Sure.
And stuffed in, wrapped in some cigars, that sort of thing.
Right, of course. So
as is the Civil War tradition for orders.
Yes, wrapped in a cigar case, of course. I'm wondering what I think this is an intellect roll. Honestly, I don't know. Let's see. What is Twig's skill? Maybe Twiggs should write up the orders, because his generalship skill, I think, would be the most applicable one.
Yeah.
Just because, drafting orders that look official is probably something that's a little bit more your purview than his. But yeah, I think, yeah. So I would say basically one of you roll for it. I'm not going to tell you exactly how effective it is. This is what's called a hidden call difficulty. So you don't actually know how, what number you need to beat in order to do it. So with that in mind, too. Sorry?
Precision or intellect?
I would say intellect, yeah, because this isn't really about penmanship. It's just about kind of getting the content.
These orders are so meticulous. They must be real. He followed the lines so straightly. Has to have been the War Department.
All right. So you said the difficulty was hidden. How do we incorporate that into? Should I just roll and tell you what the numbers are?
Yes, basically. So I'll keep it. I'll write it down, and then when it manifests or doesn't, I'll tell you what the result was. And with that in mind, remember you can also wager morale. You can risk some. You can get really sweaty when you are writing these orders by adding stamina to it, right? I mean, the way that I like to imagine that sort of abstractly is that like you stay up at night, or like rather than doing something else, like it's just something that's like I do like the like yeah, because I've like in my other games, like people have used like stamina and like charm rolls or something like that, just like to imagine like like the Key and Peele levels of just like sweat. Like,
I didn't spend any resources on it. I rolled 3 2s, a 4, a 6, and 1 negation with a 10.
Okay.
And I have 1 point generalship.
Okay. Total of 5. Alrighty.
They look pretty official.
Okay.
Now you do remember stump grinding dots his eyes with a smiley face.
Yes. I had forgotten about that. Thanks for bringing that up.
Stump grinding is of course. Actually, Kircher or Cash Regis rather, sorry. Just roll a straight up intellect. And anything that you get above a 4 is going to just add a point of success to the roll. This is an assist roll. This is how that works.
An intellect, you say?
Yep.
Five successes.
Okay. All right. So you get an extra 1. So you've got a 6 total. Which yeah. So
that
we'll
was
see.
Reminding you about stump grinding's very particular sense of penmanship.
Right.
Indeed.
Yeah. And I mean, stump grinding, of course, being a West Virginian, might actually, people in the Confederacy might know of him. He might, they might have actually corresponded with him quite closely before the war started. So getting that just right, is very important.
That would be another Civil War thing. It's like, yes, I was a pen pal of stump grinding.
Right.
He taught me how to speak Latin.
Right.
These are not always smiley faces. They're just depending on his mood of the day. And it's a way to convey that. So, but frequently frowny faces from stump grinding.
Grinding's not his eyes with his frowny face again. Uh-oh.
He's not in the right mood.
All right. Anything else you want to do before we kind of just move on to the rest of the division arriving?
No, I'm good to continue.
Okay. Yeah. So the next morning, you can wake up, and as you look north and slightly west, you can see the dust cloud coming in, and some of the first kind of cavalry detachments from the other brigades are arriving, and they are all pulling up and everything. They're sort of escorting some of the supply wagons, and it takes basically over the course of the day. The rest of the division has arrived, so they're sort of camping out as well as they can outside the stagecoach stop. Of course, as soon as General Worcester and the brigadier generals have arrived, you all lose your cushy officer cabins inside the stagecoach stop, so you have to pitch your tents with the rest of your men, and it's sort of taken over by the headquarters department of the division as they move in. But yeah, so Worcester and General Grinding is your brigadier commander. Worcester is the major general in charge of the division. But they both personally congratulate you. They've read the reports that you sent back, and they say basically, well done, right? Well done initially taking the fort without loss of life, and well done defending it, even against such paltry southern resistance.
Drunkards, a lot of them.
But yeah. So it's they're impressed with you, and more or less as your reward is that you are going to get a couple of extra days to rest while they're going to rest for like a day. They're going to restock. They're going to try to canvass for water and everything, and get that filled up as much as they can. And then once the division moves out, you two and the Kiowa regiment are going to be basically trailing behind. So you're going to get like an extra day or so to rest and recuperate. So that means when you roll your focus checks for rest, you actually get a +2 because you've had several days now to sort of recuperate and regenerate your various points and whatnot. So yeah, the night or the next day after everybody arrives, they allow everybody to rest for a day or so, and again, kind of they have like the quartermaster go over the stores and the ammunition and all that other stuff. and then you have a council of war the afternoon of the second day. It is hot as hell. It's like probably close to 100 degrees, and it is sunny, and there is not a cloud in the sky. So it is getting extremely hot, and so this is actually an extra burden on water supplies. So they're actually having quite a lot of the other cavalry go out and basically take out supply wagons and fill water. But anyway, so the situation as it stands, this is kind of the report given by the quartermaster and Major General Worcester's sort of adjutant. Is that the first march proved a little bit more strenuous than they wanted to, so they burned through a larger portion of their available food and water more than they want. So any detached brigades or any kind of detached special detachments or anything will basically only be able to take to draw on 5 extra days of food and water to go with them. So mechanically, this basically means that anytime that you are forced to like either personally or through your units like re-up your stamina by spending a point of your physical attributes or whatever, that's actually just going to manifest as costs to both rations and water, and especially water each time. So you're only going to be going with 5 days with you unless you're given any reason to have extra. But once you get back together with the division, it's not going to matter so much. So like all of your food costs and everything are covered up till this point, and they'll be covered basically up until the division leaves. But after that, you have basically you carry 5 days of rations with you because they don't want to stress out the rest of the army. Okay. Also, they have finally determined that how they're going to deal with artillery, because artillery has until now been kind of kept on its own, is its own sort of brigade, kind of assigned to itself as a grand battery. But because the resistance, from what it seems, based on your interrogation and based on the actions that you've had so far, they're actually going to break up batteries and sort of attach them to different brigades. So your brigade, I think you're technically called the Glorietta Brigade because you've got most of the California veterans who fought at the Battle of Glorietta Pass. You are actually going to get a 6-gun battery of Napoleons, and they're going to be handled by Santa Fe volunteers. Most of these guys were railroad surveyors and engineers, so they actually should be able to handle their artillery pretty well. They might be a little bit more difficult to deal with on the march, but you have no reason to suspect they're anything other than, respectable artillerists at the very least. But yeah, you've got a battery now of 6 Napoleons, 6 12-pounders. You're going to take Grinding's brigade, obviously, which you're a part of. Is going to take a position basically after kind of helping to fortify the coach stop. The coach stop itself is going to become a sort of semi-permanent supply dump. So they're actually going to leave some detachments here, and they're actually calling for more reinforcements from Santa Fe. More volunteers from Santa Fe are actually going to come down here and just park here and try to defend the stagecoach and keep it as a sort of in-between supply depot, so they can dispatch any supplies they need to as they get here. So again, thanks to a lot of your work in sort of fortifying the place and defending it, that's going to be kind of up and running pretty soon. And yeah. So the plan, as it stands, let me switch here to the map, and let me show it to you on the Discord. So the plan here. So you guys are coming from way up here, right? So like the actual, you're on the northernmost stagecoach route at this point. And it is way, way, way up to the north. So the whole force is basically going to march down here past the Twin Mountains and go due south until they hit basically the upper road, like it says here, the upper road from El Paso. And from there, this is the sort of middle of the way stage route that's going to basically, it's going to actually take you pretty close to Galveston. And it's going to take you through Austin. This is a road straight to Austin, which is the capital of Texas. And it's going to go into that sort of southern industrial heartland near the coast by Galveston and Austin and various other places like that. So going this way is actually going to further reinforce the notion that that is your overall intent, that you are actually going to kind of plunge into the heart of Texas, and you're not just here to kind of deal with Sterling, or Price, rather. So that's the plan. So this is a good 80 miles or so south of where you are now. So that's going to be in really solid conditions, 3 days march. They're obviously, they're going to send some cavalry scouts and everything forward of that to make sure there's nothing, no resistance there. But you two especially, as you're kind of marching in the sort of making up the rear of the divisional march, should be expected to possibly have to maneuver in support of the division in case they get into any fights, because the obvious thing to do from the Texas militia standpoint is to fortify as much as they can any of the bridges that go over these little rivers and any of the fords along the little rivers as well. So they're looking to kind of hit right around here, right where this sort of unnamed creek here. And they're expecting that if there is going to be resistance, it's going to be along the stagecoach route, along these river stops here. Ultimately, they wouldn't be surprised if Divide Pass, which is right there, gets fortified in some particular way. And that is something that you have to watch out for and be prepared for. So they're essentially saying expect to march into resistance as they get down here, and especially kind of the brigades that are taking up the rear should be ready to maneuver around independently and operate independently in order to support the rest of the division, if that happens to be the case. Any questions?
It makes sense to me, at least from
What I'm following.
Potato Spring.
Yeah.
I really don't want to meet the country bumpkins who live in Potato Spring, Texas.
I have a feeling Potato Spring, Texas might look exactly the same in 2021 as it did in 1863.
So I did actually look on Google Maps, and I had to end up, because everything's so different on this goofy map, I had to look up the longitude and latitude of where it was, and I looked in there's literally nothing in this part of Texas at all. Nothing. So it is empty. It's super duper empty as you go in. So mostly the difficulty of the march is going to be tedium and weather. That's really the thing to watch out for. So the weather is going to be rolled randomly, so we'll see. I mean, it could be a super severe thunderstorm, or it could just be several 100-degree days. We don't know. That's something I'm going to roll as we go. But yeah, any questions?
Hopefully it's just several 100-degree days,
right?
Not a day of
several 100-degree. It's 300.
So it's 300 degrees.
The men are roasted in their own wool, sir.
Sir, First Brigade, medium well.
All right. Any questions? Okay, go ahead and give me both of you are rolling for your units. So this is a cohesion roll with your composure skill added to it. So this is your rest to see how well you all do.
Do you want us to add in the extra day?
Oh yes, you get a +2 also, because you have several days of resting rather than just the one. Okay. Well, I'm glad that both of you did all right. So that's a 3 for the both of you. You have, or is that? Oh, you did add. No, Gertrude. So you get not an extra die. You actually rolled a 4. So you the way that you put it in the dice spot, you added extra dice to the roll rather than just flat points. So you would have added it been a 4-3 rather than a 4-1 +2, if that makes sense.
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
So the +2 is extra dice.
I did not add my +2, so I should be a 3.
Yeah. So So you both do okay. You don't actually recover any points. So any extra, any power or your stamina is back. Any power or morale that you spent and or lost has not returned. Basically, you have a couple
The
of
stamina has returned.
your stamina has returned. Yeah, your stamina comes back pretty much automatically, almost all the time, unless there are narrative conditions otherwise. So, like in extreme heat, like it is right now, it might not return so fast. But that's sort of up to the dice, because like this day where you're in the fort for a couple days and it's really hot, that's not really going to affect you all that much. But on the march, it will. But you've had a couple of uncomfortable nights, basically. You were sort of kicked out of your cushy officers' quarters that you made in the stagecoach stop, and now you're basically like sleeping 10 feet away from the horse lines and the latrines. And, it's, I have a couple of pretty uncomfortable nights. Sleeping in pretty close proximity to not only your own men, but also like being stuffed next to other men of the division that you don't know very well and who are like loud and they play the banjo late into the night and and stuff like that. So, but yeah, so you have you're there to kind of watch the rest of the division march away. They all march on down south. You draw your 5 days of rations, and then the morning of like the third day, you set off, following. You're maybe 5 or 10 miles behind the rearmost part of the division. So you're close enough for contact. You're definitely close enough for like Twiggs and the Kiowa cavalry to keep in contact in case anything happens. But you're far enough away that you are essentially operating independently. So with that in mind, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to make a couple of weather rolls. So what I'm doing is every single day, I'm just going to roll a 5d10. And
Come on, snow.
yeah, anything. I mean, there are snap freeze storms in Texas. That's a thing that happens. Usually not in the summer, but it can happen.
Not in August.
Yeah, it'll happen. It can happen in the autumn, and it can happen in the winter especially. But anyway, so I'm going to roll 5d10. Anything 4 or above is going to be inclement. Hey, Lauren.
Hello.
How's it going?
Not bad, not bad.
Hopefully you have good luck on the weather. Make sure it's not a horrible storm. No, it's fine, honestly. It's actually a quite pleasant day. I rolled a 3. So the first day of marching is very, very easy. You don't have to roll any kind of extra strain or anything like that as you're going. And it just marches. You all march good 20 miles or so. You can see the campfires of the division set up ahead of you, and same thing. So roll another focus roll. That's your reward, is that you get a day of nothing, so you can roll another focus roll and see if you recover any more points. So again, it's cohesion, and then you add your composure from your personal skill.
We are bad at this.
God damn.
So yeah, okay. Freeze again. Again, you're put into camp next to like, I don't want to be next to the fucking Santa Fe guys. Santa Fe, they're a bunch of weirdos. They're they think they're all high and mighty. New Mexico volunteers, that kind of thing. So I'm actually gonna say both of you roll leadership. Or anything sort of like leadership. Personal magnetism might work as well.
I don't like the key they play Wake Up Pony.
Yeah, let's try.
Off key.
What attribute should we be using?
This is a personal skill roll, so you can use charm, or anything that you think might be applicable.
Probably charm.
Yeah.
Yes. Not an auspicious day.
No, especially so. So your men, Twiggs, you of course are a notorious abolitionist. This is known throughout the entire army, and this is of course this is still 1863, and sort of the fervor of abolition as a means to like kick the shit out of the South hasn't really caught on quite yet. So it's still kind of a thing that kind of marks you in the rest of the army as kind of a almost like a troublemaker or somebody who's, your sights are so lofty that you probably can't possibly be a good military man, right? So,
Hey, you know how you can tell an abolitionist in the army? Oh, don't worry, they'll tell you. Twiggs won't shut up about it.
so what ends up happening is that as you are sort of, your men are dealing with their horses and they're getting everything all camped up and everything. Some of your men end up getting into a big fight with a bunch of the other men in the army because there are some men of the army who are taking exception to you personally, and they're saying things like you're, an insufferable abolitionist, and you're a leveler, and you're, one of these free soilers, and mixing up all sorts of metaphors and political ideals all together in one big lump sum. So your men beat the ever living hell out of a couple of the guys from the New Mexico brigades, and that's taken rather poorly. And you just have a couple of men who basically have to be forcibly hauled off of a few of the other men in the brigade, and they're gonna go into the next day with some black eyes and busted up knuckles and riding a little saddle sore at the beginning of the next day. But that's all. Just sort of tensions within the army. So luckily, you're not at a point where being in the middle of fucking nowhere, Texas, nobody's really going to desert because where the hell are they going to go? So desertion's not at all going to be a problem. It might start being a problem when you start getting into the more industrialized parts of Texas because there are things like towns, saloons, brothels, work for the railroad, stuff like that. So that might be a thing later. But for now, basically, you can feel proud that some of your men got into a fist fight for you personally.
Can I parlay that into something?
Sure.
So, because I'm resentful class conscious, so it's probably expected. Okay, if there were any, was it all enlisted guys, or were there anyone that would actually I have to talk to on a day-to-day basis that got in trouble?
Among your men?
Yeah.
There's a lieutenant whose name is Rupert Hesh. And he's a young lieutenant who also, you've known him pretty well for a little while, and he is also, if you're an abolitionist, he's a super abolitionist. He has, he personally corresponded with John Brown before the war. He was one of, the sheep farmers that John Brown was trying to organize into a sheep farmers union. This is a real thing that John Brown actually did before the war. But so he comes from sort of eastern Pennsylvania, where basically his sheep farm was.
Did he get a pipe? One of the souvenir pipes.
Right. Yeah. But yeah. So Lieutenant Rupert Hesh is in particular marked as one of the guys who will, do the classic throw a guy through a saloon window. If they don't have proper respect for old John Brown. So one of your lieutenants. Yeah.
It's the military, so he has to go talk to his commanding officer about it.
Mm-hmm.
And just to mitigate any problems with my guys, the way I want to handle it is kind of he shows up and it's all very formal. I don't say a whole lot. And it kind of goes along the lines of, well, did you win?
Yes, sir. I absolutely did, sir.
Well, good. That's your job as a soldier. Get out of here.
Yes, sir. It won't happen again, sir.
Sure.
Soldier, are you drowsy?
All right. I'm going to share a picture of this is what you get to see as you are coming up to the next day of March. This is kind of what you're marching past. So if you remember on the map, these are the Twin Mountains. Right. So, some of your men are giggling a little bit, making crass remarks about what these mountains look like and what they should be called. But yeah, you get to march past the Twin Mountains in Texas, and they look like that. So this is about halfway to where you're meant to be going.
I probably should have asked that lieutenant when we had him if there was any gold in this area.
You probably should have,
Just
yeah.
in case.
Yeah.
We're not prospecting.
Yeah, but now the division's got him, so it's out of your hands.
Yeah.
Well, no, you let him go, right? You paroled him, so
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
back. If I come across him again,
yeah.
I'll ask him.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Right now, like the numbers of prisoners that you have are so few that you can probably get away with paroling, but who knows how things might shake out. Because this is unprecedented. Obviously didn't actually happen in the real Civil War, so we can just fucking make it up as we go along. Welcome to the alternate reality.
I think that's the idleness. So when everybody else sees the little Tetons there and is snickering and imagining things, Cash Regis definitely just thinks they're full of gold.
Probably. They probably are. Or
That's my idle marching daydream.
yeah. All right. So day 2. See how the weather cooperates.
Come on, pleasant.
It's actually a little chilly, which is actually quite pleasant. It's a fairly easy day, so you don't have to worry about anything kind of inclement. It's actually just like 10 or 15 degrees cooler than it was the day before.
But this is the most clement day we've had ever.
Yeah. So yeah, that's day number 2. You march past. You basically camp kind of in the lee of the Twin Mountains up here, and it's
I'm still listening. Just gotta help the baby out.
yeah. Yeah. So another night in camp. So go ahead and roll another focus, or cohesion plus your composure. Oh, you gotta
Dang.
put it. Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
You're super consistent, at least. I'm gonna say, yeah, you also give me a leadership role of some kind. Personal magnetism would work also. Again, like mostly the problem is your men are just bored, right? They're not like. I guess I could also be using the. I'm not sure why I'm actually rolling and not using the roll thing. Oh, excuse me. But
Are you telling me they're already sick of hearing the story of how I found that lump of gold?
I think they might be.
Sir, we've all heard this story.
What? I thought
Well, I will try and pull a story out of my father's time at the library back in Philadelphia. I grew up. I heard lots of stories, so
Okay.
let's give that a try. Didn't remember it very well.
It's like you're not rolling badly enough that anything like really bad happens. It's just like your men are just like there's just no ending to the tedium, and it's like we thought there'd be more battles. Like what you call that one little skirmish we had a battle? That wasn't no battle. That kind of thing. So they're like,
even got hurt.
yeah, they're like wondering like where are these sort of vaunted Confederate legions that have been scouring the South? Like where's the tens of thousands of men that were fought at Gettysburg? And people are like, well, Alistair, they're probably in Virginia, I'd imagine. And it's like, shut up! God damn you, Robert! I've had enough of your mouth. So it's basically just like, yeah, tensions are a little high. Not really enough for you to like lose morale points or anything like that, but like it's boredom, right? Like it's just boring, just
Cash
marching.
Regis has been reading from the last batch of newspapers that he's kind of hoarded to just like idly read through, and we've already read all the main stories. Now we're into like the financial section. Gather around, man, and let me tell you of the Colt companies. Stock dividends.
Well, the railroad dividends are still trending quite high, which, is favorable to the Union, I suppose.
That is quite interesting, wouldn't you agree, man?
The idea that railroad investment has stayed fairly steady throughout the war is Well, it's something, man.
We're fighting for it.
And then some of your
Imagine
men,
he has to remind them that's what they're fighting for, and
right?
there's a very half-hearted
Oh,
cheer.
Some of your men bring up like, well, now that we've got this alliance with the Indians, I wonder if that's going to affect like the route of the railroad, right? Because we're not just going to cut right through their buffalo country anymore. Now that they're allies, huh? That might actually have a quite negative impact on the railroad investment.
Oh, damn it, man! We've run out of the financial section. All I have are the personal ads from the San Francisco Chronicle I brought with me.
Looking for personal servant, age no more than 35 years old.
It's the very boring section of 19th century newspapers. And they're like, well, Miss Frances Lee was visiting Sacramento this weekend.
yeah, it's exactly that.
Just-
Imagine a bunch of your men just sitting there like, oh, what?
what can you all imagine? Cash Regis is very paternal, so
Yeah.
they're all sitting on the ground.
Right.
He has a chair.
Right.
It's just feed from them. Now, who wants to imagine who wants to imagine when Patricia Moss came back from Sacramento?
Whoa.
You in the back, private.
Her husband got malaria.
Are you teaching the soldiers how to play improv games?
It's just about propriety and social, social customs. So go ahead. You had another quite uneventful day there on the trail. So if you would like to roll your cohesion plus your composure again. Oh man, your men your men. They're kind of those hardwired guys who just like they're here to fight. And they're going to find a fight one way or another. So go ahead and give me another leadership roll. See if you can put a stop to this before it ends up becoming a full-on brawl that either Worcester or Grinding is going to have to pay attention to.
It'll be charm and
your generalship, I would say. Okay.
There we go.
So this
That's
is
better.
it's fine. You're able to get everybody under control, and again, like you're sort of keep your presence around the camp known. Like you don't retire to like your marquee or anything like that. You just like constantly come out wearing. It's like, Hesh, remember what we talked about? Yes, sir. And he slides the knuckle dusters off his fingers, puts them back in his pocket. Now just wait.
No, it's here. It's fine. Keep it here. But it's not bad.
Maybe our men can have a nice sandball fight.
Maybe.
Actually, you know what? Because this is a problem. We're on the march, right? There's not like days where we're resting or anything.
Right. Yeah, you're marching, and then like you camp during nightfall, and you sleep until daybreak. You sleep until like an hour before daybreak, and you break up the tents and everything, and get back up on the march.
There's not really time to do other things. The roles are to see how well like the march goes. Right?
Yeah, more or less. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, then we'll just continue onwards.
Okay. All right. So this is the rest of the brigade should probably the rest of the division should probably arrive at that other stage road later on today. So again, like you all kind of hang back until like the rest of the division is 5 or 10 miles or so to your south, and then you kind of police up the camp and everything. So as you're marching, let's see what the weather's like again. Oh, I did it again, but okay. So today is actually raining. Not raining super hard, but it is raining. So it's a little. Everybody's gonna have a +1 pressure because it is raining and it's dumb, and it's really windy, and like water gets into your eyes and it gets in your horse's eyes, and it's just like you're all a little annoyed because of all the rain. But at one point of pressure. So yeah, any roll that we make is, rather than being a difficulty of 4, is going to be a difficulty of 5, just because it's annoying mostly. So remember, you can buy off points of pressure by spending points of morale. So you can just say like, you know what, my men are just going to be annoyed, but it's not. They're not going to do anything harder. They're just going to be annoyed, like some infants tend to be.
Now
Sometimes.
we can have a mud ball fight.
Yeah.
I'll buy the pressure off with being surly.
Okay. Yeah. So your men are a little surly. So quite a lot of them, you notice, have little marks on their knuckles, and you know.
Physically active.
Yeah.
I mean, his men are presumably on horseback, but I like to imagine that some of the other board men are just like, quit shoving.
Yeah.
That private has been stepping on my heel and giving me a flat tire
Right.
50 miles.
Got pebbles in my shoes all the way to Austin.
Stop pushing.
All right. So I'm going to do a couple of secret rolls, basically to decide what the whole division's going to do. Okay. Well, just a couple more things. So basically, as you're sort of marching down to the south, you get a dispatch rider coming up from the rest of the division who basically says they have spotted. Basically, again, I'll put up that map again so that we can kind of be on the same page. This one here. So, right. So they've arrived down here, basically right on the east side of this little, they call it the North Fork or whatever this is, right? And they've marched past the green mounds, which also look like tits, as all of the soldiers titter to each other, right? So they've basically gotten down to the green mounds, and they have spotted a Confederate holding force with artillery support in Lupine Camp Creek. So fortunately, because it's actually been quite dry and you haven't had a thunderstorm or anything recently, the Lupine Camp Creek is basically a mud creek. It's not actually a deep river at all. So you don't really have to find a place to ford. The biggest problem is that because it's basically ankle-deep mud going through the entire thing, any men who are trying to assault across it are going to be very easy to hit, and they're going to get very easily bogged down. So there is a single bridge, but the scout comes and basically tells you that like it's under fire by a battery of 6-pounders, and so despite the fact that they're not super heavy, they'll still cut up infantry pretty good if they're trying to move across. So so Worcester, in charge of the division, has basically ordered you guys, the sort of laggers, the kind of rear portion of the march, to strike out eastward as you can and try to come up along southward on the east bank of the Lupine Camp Creek. And that way you can clear out the Confederate, you can outflank the Confederates and hopefully force them to retreat. So it does look like, very likely, that they are actually going to be sort of retiring in order to make holds at each creek crossing. So not all of these are super huge. Some of them are actually quite small, but it does look like that's probably what they're planning to do. So if maybe you split your forces up and you have one of your groups kind of strike down, maybe the infantry striking down southward along Lupine Camp Creek, and then the other one kind of winging out even farther to the east before you hook south to see where, like, to the extent to which the Confederates are kind of strung out along the road. That might be really useful information to have. But it's up to you ultimately about what you'd like to do about this situation. So right now, Worcester basically has sort of arrested his forces and will not be attempting to cross quite yet. They're willing to play for time and is looking for other places that are fordable that won't basically like bring its men into the muzzles of 12 6-pounders, which is still pretty bad.
Yeah. So
that's essentially the situation. So you're kind of hooking in from the north side, and it's up to you kind of how far along you want to kind of hook around to see what you can do about wrapping this up. And as you recall from the earlier briefing, it's looking pretty likely that I'll share the map once again, that the ultimate sort of idea behind the Confederate strategy here is probably to make these little defenses along each creek pass, because these are bridged, right? This is a coach road, so these are actually bridged. They're timber bridges, but they're there. So each time they'll try to make a hold around there, and then ultimately kind of probably trying to hook up as much as they can right over by this divide pass, which makes a pretty narrow valley that you'll have to pass through. So ultimately, kind of how you guys want to deal with it is up to you. And the estimates that you've been given by the scouts that have come up basically say that it looks like maybe around 1,000 Confederates are holding Lupine Camp Creek right now.
She's been in there playing peekaboo with herself.
Mm.
Is that a decision you want to make now, or should we talk about it and start up on Thursday? Because I was thinking Regis could probably handle just flanking the river crossing, and if my guys want to burn some energy off, we can run on and really push.
Mm. Yeah, it's up to you guys. We can handle this anyway. We could also we might have to do bits of this separately, just especially if you're going to kind of split your forces. I might have like 2 different maps ready to go, but we'll see. I mean, we can also do you can talk about it off camera, and we could just kind of resume it on Thursday.
Okay. All right. On that note, I think she's about to have a meltdown, so it's probably a good time to cut it.
Okay.
All right.
Alrighty. Well, yeah. We'll meet up at 2:00 on Thursday if we can.
Okay. I'm available.
Cool.
So I'll definitely make it.
All right. Sounds good.
I'm free all week, anytime.
Cool.
Talk to you guys soon.
All right.
See ya.